Welcome back to another 3 chapters of Carmilla. We begin with chapter 10, Bereaved. It was about 10 months since we had last seen him, but that time had sufficed to make an alteration of years in his appearance. He had grown thinner. Something of gloom and anxiety had taken the place of that cordial serenity which used to characterize his features. His dark blue eyes, always penetrating, now gleamed with a sterner light from under his shaggy gray eyebrows. It was not such a change as grief alone usually induces, and angrier passions seemed to have had their share in bringing it about. We had not long resumed our drive when the General began to talk with his usual soldierly directness of the bereavement, as he termed it, which he had sustained in the death of his beloved niece and ward. And he then broke out in a tone of intense bitterness and fury, inveighing against the hellish arts to which she had fallen a victim, and expressing with more exasperation than piety his wonder that heaven should tolerate so monstrous an indulgence of the lusts and malignity of hell. My father, who at once saw that something very extraordinary had befallen, asked him, if not too painful to him, to detail the circumstances which he thought justified the strong terms in which he expressed himself. "I should tell you with all pleasure," said the General, "but you would not believe me." "Why should I not?" he asked. "Because," he answered testily, "you believe in nothing but what consists with your own prejudices and illusions. I remember when I was like you, but I have learned better." "Try me," said my father. "I am not such a dogmatist as you suppose. Besides which, I know very well that you generally require proof for what you believe, and am therefore very strongly predisposed to respect your conclusions." "You are right in supposing that I have not been led lightly into a belief in the marvelous, for what I have experienced is marvelous, and I have been forced by extraordinary evidence to credit that which ran counter diametrically to all my theories. I have been made the dupe of a preternatural conspiracy." Notwithstanding his professions of confidence in the General's penetration, I saw my father at this point glance at the General with, as I thought, a marked suspicion of his sanity. The General did not see it, luckily. He was looking gloomily and curiously into the glades and vistas of the woods that were opening before us. "You are going to the ruins of Karnstein," he said. "Yes, it is a lucky coincidence. Do you know I was going to ask you to bring me there to inspect them? I have a special object in exploring. There is a ruined chapel, ain't there, with a great many tombs of that extinct family?" "So there are. Highly interesting," said my father. "I hope you are thinking of claiming the title and estates." My father said this gaily, but the General did not recollect the laugh or even the smile which courtesy exacts from a friend's jokes. On the contrary, he looked grave and even fierce, ruminating on a matter that stirred his anger and horror. "Something very different," he said gruffly. "I mean to unearth some of those fine people. I hope, by God's blessing, to accomplish a pious sacrilege here, which will relieve our earth of certain monsters, and enable honest people to sleep in their beds without being assailed by murderers. I have strange things to tell you, my dear friend, such as I myself would have scouted as incredible a few months since." My father looked at him again, but this time not with a glance of suspicion, with an eye rather of keen intelligence and alarm. The House of Karnstein, he said, has been long extinct, 100 years at least. My dear wife was maternally descended from the Karnsteins, but the name and title have long ceased to exist. The castle is a ruin. The very village is deserted. It is 50 years since the smoke of a chimney was ever seen there. Not a roof left. Quite true. I have heard a great deal about that since I last saw you. A great deal that will astonish you. But I had better relate everything in the order in which it occurred, said the general. You saw my dear ward. My child, I may call her. No creature could have been more beautiful, and only 3 months ago none more blooming. Yes, poor thing. When I saw her last she was certainly quite lovely, said my father. I was grieved and shocked more than I can tell you, my dear friend. I know what a blow it was to you. He took the general's hand and they exchanged a kind pressure. Tears gathered in the old soldier's eyes. He did not seek to conceal them. He said, We have been very old friends. I knew you would feel for me, childless as I am. She may have become an object of very near interest to me, and repaid my care by an affection that cheered my home and made my life happy. That is all gone. The years that remain to me on earth may not be very long, but by God's mercy I hope to accomplish a service to mankind before I die, and to subserve the vengeance of heaven upon the fiends who have murdered my poor child in the spring of her hopes and beauty. You said just now that you intended relating everything as it occurred, said my father. Pray do. I assure you it is not mere curiosity that prompts me. By this time we had reached the point at which the Drunstall road by which the general had come diverges from the road which we were traveling to Karnstein. How far is it to the ruins? Inquired the general, looking anxiously forward. About half a league, answered my father. Pray let us hear the story you were so good as to promise. Chapter 11. The Story. With all my heart, said the general, with an effort after a short pause in which to arrange his subject. He commenced one of the strangest narratives I had ever heard. My dear child was looking forward with great pleasure to the visit you had been so good as to arrange for her to your charming daughter. Here he made me a gallant but melancholy bow. In the meantime we had an invitation to my old friend the Count Karlsfeld, whose castle is about 6 leagues to the other side of Karnstein. It was to attend the series of fetes which, you remember, were given by him in honor of his illustrious visitor, the Grand Duke Charles. Yes, and very splendid I believe they were, said my father. Precisely. But then his hospitalities are quite regal. He has Aladdin's lamp. The night from which my sorrow dates was devoted to a magnificent masquerade. The grounds were thrown open, the trees hung with colored lamps. There was such a display of fireworks as Paris itself has never witnessed. And such music. Music, you know, is my weakness. Such ravishing music. The finest instrumental band, perhaps, in the world, and the finest singers who could be collected from all the great operas in Europe. As you wandered through these fantastically illuminated grounds, the moonlighted chateau throwing a rosy light from its long rows of windows, you would suddenly hear these ravishing voices stealing from the silence of some grove, or rising from boats upon the lake. I felt myself, as I looked and listened, carried back into the romance and poetry of my early youth. When the fireworks were ended, the ball beginning, we returned to a noble suite of rooms that were thrown open to the dancers. A masked ball, you know, is a beautiful sight, but so brilliant a spectacle of the kind I never saw before. It was a very aristocratic assembly. I was myself almost the only nobody present. My dear child was looking quite beautiful. She wore no mask. Her excitement and delight added an unspeakable charm to her features, always lovely. I remarked a young lady dressed magnificently but wearing a mask who appeared to me to be observing my ward with extraordinary interest. I had seen her earlier in the evening in the great hall, and again for a few minutes walking near us on the terrace under the castle windows, similarly employed. A lady, also masked, richly and gravely dressed, and with a stately air like a person of rank, accompanied her as a chaperone. Had the young lady not worn a mask, I could, of course, have been more certain upon the question of which she was really watching my poor darling. I am now well assured that she was. We were now in one of the salons. My poor dear child had been dancing and was resting a little in one of the chairs near the door. I was standing near. The two ladies I have mentioned had approached, and the younger took the chair next to my ward, while her companion stood beside me, and for a little time addressed herself in low tone to her charge. Availing herself of the privilege of her mask, she turned to me, and in the tone of an old friend and calling me by name, opened a conversation with me, which piqued my curiosity a good deal. She referred to many scenes where she had met me, at court and at distinguished houses. She alluded to little incidents which I had long ceased to think of, but which I found had only lain in abeyance in my memory, for they instantly started into life at her touch. I became more and more curious to ascertain who she was every moment. She parried my attempts to discover very adroitly and pleasantly. The knowledge she showed of many passages in my life seemed to me all but unaccountable. She appeared to take a not unnatural pleasure in foiling my curiosity, and in seeing me flounder in my eager perplexity from one conjecture to another. In the meantime, the young lady, whom her mother called by the odd name of Millarca, when she once or twice addressed her, had with the same ease and grace got into conversation with my ward. She introduced herself by saying that her mother was a very old acquaintance of mine. She spoke of the agreeable audacity which a mask rendered practicable. She talked like a friend. She admired her dress and insinuated very prettily her admiration of her beauty. She amused her with the laughing criticisms upon the people who crowded the ballroom, and laughed at my poor child's fun. She was very witty and lively when she pleased, and after a time they had grown very good friends, and the young stranger lowered her mask, displaying a remarkably beautiful face. I had never seen it before, neither had my dear child, but though it was new to us, the features were so engaging as well as lovely that it was impossible not to feel the attraction powerfully. My poor girl did so. I never saw anyone more taken with another at first sight, unless indeed it was the stranger herself, who seemed quite to have lost her heart to her. In the meantime, availing myself of the license of a masquerade, I put not a few questions to the elder lady. "You have me puzzled utterly," I said, laughing. "Is that not enough? Won't you now consent to stand on equal terms and do me the kindness to remove your mask?" "Can any request be more unreasonable?" she replied. "Ask a lady to yield an advantage. Beside, how do you know you should recognize me? Years make changes. As you see, I said with a bow, and I suppose a rather melancholy little laugh. As philosophers tell us, she said. And how do you know that the sight of my face would help you? I should take chance for that, I answered. It is vain trying to make yourself out an old woman. Your figure betrays you. Years, nevertheless, have passed since I saw you. Rather, since you saw me, for that is what I am considering. Milarka there is my daughter. I cannot then be young even in the opinion of people whom time has taught to be indulgent, and I may not like to be compared with what you remember me. You have no mask to remove. You can offer me nothing in exchange. My petition is to your pity to remove it, and mine to yours to let it stay where it is, she replied. Well, then at least you will tell me whether you are a French or a German. You speak both languages so perfectly. I don't think I shall tell you that, General. You intend a surprise and are meditating the particular point of attack. At all events, you won't deny this, I said, that being honored by your permission to converse, I ought to know how to address you. Shall I say, Madame la Comtesse? She laughed, and she would, no doubt, have met me with another evasion, if indeed I can treat any occurrence in an interview, every circumstance of which was prearranged, as I now believe, with the profoundest cunning, as liable to be modified by accident. As to that, she began, but was interrupted, almost as she opened her lips, by a gentleman dressed in black, who looked particularly elegant and distinguished, with this drawback that his face was most deadly pale, the most I ever saw except in death. He was in no masquerade, in the plain evening dress of a gentleman, and he said, without a smile, but with a courtly and unusually low bow, Will Madame la Comtesse permit me to say a very few words which might interest her? The lady turned quickly to him and touched her lip in token of silence. Then she said to me, Keep my place for me, General. I shall return when I have said a few words. And with this injunction playfully given, she walked a little aside with the gentleman in black, and talked for some minutes, apparently very earnestly. They then walked away slowly together in the crowd, and I lost them for some minutes. I spent the interval in cudgeling my brains for a conjecture as to the identity of the lady who seemed to remember me so kindly, and I was thinking of turning about and joining in the conversation between my pretty ward and the Countess's daughter, and trying whether, by time she returned, I might not have a surprise in store for her by having her name, title, chateau, and estates at my finger's end. But at this moment she returned, accompanied by the pale man in black, who said, I shall return and inform Madame la Comtesse when her carriage is at the door. He withdrew with a bow. Chapter 12. A Petition. Then we are to lose Madame la Comtesse. But I hope only for a few hours, I said with a low bow. It may be that only, or it may be a few weeks. I was very unlucky his speaking to me just now as he did. Do you now know me? I assure her I did not. You shall know me, she said, but not at present. We are older and better friends than perhaps you suspect. I cannot yet declare myself. I shall, in 3 weeks, pass your beautiful castle, about which I have been making inquiries. I shall then look upon you for an hour or two, and renew a friendship which I never think of without 1,000 pleasant recollections. This moment a piece of news has reached me like a thunderbolt. I must set out now, and travel by a devious route nearly 100 miles with all the dispatch I can possibly make. My perplexities multiply. I am only deterred by the compulsory reserve I practice as to my name from making a very singular request of you. My poor child has not quite recovered her strength. Her horse fell with her at a hunt which she had ridden out to witness. Her nerves have not yet recovered the shock, and our physician says that she must on no account exert herself for some time to come. We came here in consequence by very easy stages, hardly 6 leagues a day. I must now travel day and night on a mission of life and death. A mission, the critical and momentous nature of which I shall be able to explain to you when we meet, as I hope we shall in a few weeks, without the necessity of any concealment. She went on to make her petition, and it was in a tone of a person from whom such a request amounted to conferring, rather than seeking, a favor. This was only in manner, and it seemed quite unconsciously. Than the terms in which it was expressed, nothing could be more deprecatory. It was simply that I would consent to take charge of her daughter during her absence. This was, all things considered, a strange, not to say an audacious, request. She, in some sort, disarmed me by stating and admitting everything that could be urged against it, and throwing herself entirely upon my chivalry. At the same moment, by a fatality that seemed to have predetermined all that happened, my poor child came to my side and, in an undertone, besought me to invite our new friend, Millarca, to pay us a visit. She had just been sounding her, and thought, if her mamma would allow her, she would like it extremely. At another time, I should have told her to wait a little, until, at least, we knew who they were. But I had not a moment to think in. The two ladies assailed me together, and I must confess, the refined and beautiful face of the young lady, about which there was something extremely engaging, as well as the elegance and fire of high birth, determined me. And, quite overpowered, I submitted and undertook too easily the care of the young lady whom her mother called Millarca. The Countess beckoned to her daughter, who listened with grave attention while she told her in general terms how suddenly and peremptorily she had been summoned, and also of the arrangement she had made for her under my care, adding that I was one of her earliest and most valued friends. I made, of course, such speeches as the case seemed to call for, and found myself on reflection in a position I did not half like. The gentleman in black returned and very ceremoniously conducted the lady from the room. The demeanor of this gentleman was such as to impress me with the conviction that the Countess was a lady very much more of importance than her modest title alone might have led me to assume. Her last charge to me was that no attempt was to be made to learn more about her than I might have already guessed, until her return. Our distinguished host, whose guest she was, knew her reasons. But here, she said, neither I nor my daughter could safely remain for more than a day. I removed my mask imprudently for a moment about an hour ago, and, too late, I fancied you saw me. So I resolved to seek an opportunity of talking a little to you. Had I found that you had seen me, I would have thrown myself on your highest sense of honor to keep my secret for some weeks. As it is, I am satisfied that you did not see me. But if you suspect, or on reflection should suspect, who I am, I commit myself in like manner entirely to your honor. My daughter will observe the same secrecy, and I know well that you will, from time to time, remind her, lest she should thoughtlessly disclose it. She whispered a few words to her daughter, kissed her hurriedly twice, and went away, accompanied by the pale gentleman in black, and disappeared into the crowd. "In the next room," said Millarca, "there's a window that looks upon the hall door. I should like to see the last of Mamma and kiss my hand to her." We assented, of course, and accompanied her to the window. We looked out and saw a handsome old-fashioned carriage, with a troop of couriers and footmen. We saw the slim figure of the pale gentleman in black, as he held a thick velvet cloak and placed it about her shoulders, and threw the hood over her head. She nodded to him and touched his hand with hers. He bowed low repeatedly as the door closed and the carriage began to move. "She is gone," said Millarca with a sigh. "She is gone," I repeated to myself for the first time in the hurried moments that had elapsed since my consent, reflecting upon the folly of my act. "She did not look up," said the young lady plaintively. "The Countess had taken off her mask, perhaps, and did not care to show her face," I said. "And she could not know that you were in the window." She sighed and looked in my face. She was so beautiful that I relented. I was sorry I had for a moment repented of my hospitality, and I determined to make amends for the unavowed churlishness of my reception. The young lady, replacing her mask, joined my ward in persuading me to return to the grounds, where the concert was soon to be renewed. We did so, and walked up and down the terrace that lies under the castle windows. Millarca became very intimate with us, and amused us with lively descriptions and stories of most of the great people whom we saw upon the terrace. I liked her more and more every minute. Her gossip, without being ill-natured, was extremely diverting to me, who had been so long out of the great world. I thought what life she would give to our sometimes lonely evenings at home. This ball was not over until the morning sun had almost reached the horizon. It pleased the Grand Duke to dance till then, so loyal people could not go away or think of bed. We had just got through a crowded saloon when my ward asked me what had become of Millarca. I thought she had been by her side, and she fancied she was by mine. The fact was, we had lost her. All my efforts to find her were vain. I feared that she had mistaken, in the confusion of a momentary separation from us, other people for her new friends, and had, possibly, pursued and lost them in the extensive grounds which were thrown open to us. Now, in the full force, I recognize a new folly in my having undertaken the charge of a young lady without so much as knowing her name, and fettered as I was by promises, of the reasons for imposing which I knew nothing, I could not even point my inquiries by saying that the missing young lady was the daughter of the Countess who had taken her departure only a few hours ago. Morning broke. It was clear daylight before I gave up my search. It was not till near 2 o'clock the next day that we heard anything of my missing charge. About that time a servant knocked at my niece's door to say that he had been earnestly requested by a young lady who appeared to be in great distress to make out where she could find the General Baron Spielsdorf and the young lady, his daughter, in whose charge she had been left by her mother. There could be no doubt, notwithstanding the slight inaccuracy, that our young friend had turned up, and so she had. Would to heaven we had lost her. She told my poor child a story to account for her having failed to recover us for so long. Very late, she said, she had gotten to the housekeeper's bedroom in despair of finding us, and had then fallen into a deep sleep which, long as it was, had hardly sufficed to recruit her strength after the fatigues of the ball. That day, Millarca came home with us. I was only too happy, after all, to have secured so charming a companion for my dear girl.